All right, man.
All right.
And thanks for calling.
Bye-bye. Yes. So, yes, our Greg is definitely one of our regulars on the show here. Always giving us lots of insights into the VR world, the augmented reality world, et cetera, et cetera. So now we're going to introduce our next guest. Are you ready?
Have we actually been on the air all this time?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
I noticed that you weren't paying any attention to the red light, so I finally pulled your volume down, but yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Yes, we do have our
Welcome to
guest.
Radioland. Mm-hmm. Red light means mic on.
Oh, yes. And there should be a light on my head when I'm paying attention.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so we do have Aligzanduh Hagen in the studio. Aligzanduh has, according to his bio, has worked as a research engineer in telecommunications for NTT Docomo. That must be Japanese, huh? Following
it's the largest cellular carrier in Japan.
Oh, cellular carrier in Japan. Yeah. Okay. And patents, you have filing patents in mobile, wireless, internet, and directory services. So you actually have patents for technology.
Yes.
You've made.
Yes.
Interesting. And you've worked as a systems analyst, a financial analyst, a financial journalist, and currently you're CEO of Etheric Networks, which actually provides bandwidth for a lot of hard-to-reach locations in the Bay Area.
Yeah, that's about half of our customers.
Like me.
Yeah.
About half your customers, huh?
Yeah.
And so you have a company. What is it, about 20 employees or so?
Yeah, 22 right now.
22 employees. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's funny. I was 22 just on the way here.
Looking for a couple more.
All right. And what I thought was we're going to get to the details of your little chat after the CBS News that is coming up now.
Okay.
But so we're going to be talking about some of your ideas on economics and the new economy, from what I understand.
Pick up where we left off.
Right. And I'm bringing the audience up to speed a little bit.
Right.
As an innovator in technology, you're seeing how we can be an innovator in economic models as well. Maybe they go together in some way. Huh?
Well, they better go together or we're in a lot of trouble. Because the technology's here, So I think that what we're seeing with the internet is that we're going to see the Republican-Democrat paradigm explode.
Really?
I hope so, and that's what I'm most interested in is the progressive and the libertarian alliance.
Yes. Okay, well, let's talk more about that after the news here, about our existing system.
All right, stay tuned. Dr. Future Show. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, Will Durst here with a few observations of last year. Usually over the period of 12 months, you get an equal balance of your good days and your bad days. But holy moly, catfish. Seems like last year the good days decided to hide behind the monkey bars and the teeter-totter hardly moved. Well, with that fat punk bad days grounded on his end of the board, throwing rocks at squirrels. 2014 was to years what Boko Haram is to tolerance. Donald Sterling and Martin Luther King keynote speakers, Rob Ford and all-you-can-eat buffets. Oh, wait, that does go together. Well, you catch my drift. And completely out of the blue, here they are, a list of resolutions that should be made by people for the 6th year of the second decade of the 21st century, but probably won't. The 114th Congress resolves to supersede the 113th Congress's successes by accomplishing even less, or as it's known in layman's language, absolutely nothing. Say it again. Barack Obama vows to never be further than an arm's length away from his veto pen. Stung by the specter of NFL violence, the CEO of Nike avers to never again associate with overpaid athletes and instead feature school teachers in all its ads. Then everybody laughs. Portugal aspires to be more like Greece. John Boehner pledges to find a foundation color that reads less pumpkin and more summer squash. Kim Kardashian makes a concerted effort to get back to the thing that she's really good at, and equally determined to discover what it is besides showing off her butt. Republicans pledge to work out their differences with the hardline partisan hacks who refuse to compromise on their side of the aisle before yelling at Democrats, and versa versa. For KSCO Radio, I, Will Durst, vow to be funnier this year.
CBS News Update, I'm Dan Raviv. 6 days after 12 people were murdered at the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, then 4 French Jews killed in a kosher food store on Friday, the Prime Minister of France, Manuel Valls, declares we're at war against radical Islam, jihadism, and terrorism. And Elaine Cobb reports from Paris that the female suspect who flew to Turkey and probably crossed into Syria isn't the only person sought.
French authorities say they're looking for 6 people who they believe were in contact with the Kouachi brothers. They're also looking for someone who may be driving Hayat Boumedienne's Mini Cooper. It was registered to her, but was no longer at her address when police went to search the home that she shared with Amadi Koulibaly.
He was the murderer of the 4 Jews who today were buried in Israel. CBS News has learned the Kouachis, who massacred staff members at Charlie Hebdo, had received $20,000 sent by Al-Qaeda in Yemen. CBS News Update, I'm Dan Raviv.
Since 1997, number 26, Mr. Bill Miller has been calling balls and strikes in the big leagues, including 6 Division Series, 4 League Championship Series, and 2 World Series. Tune in or call into the special Our Local Sports Show to learn about strike zones, strikeout calls, and the life of a Major League umpire. This Wednesday, 7 to 8 p.m. on KSCO or KSCO.com.
What's lurking on the dark side tonight on Coast to Coast AM?
Did Columbus really discover America? Maybe the Chinese. I'm George Norrie, and on our next program, Carl Lernberger joins me to talk about evidence from other civilizations inhabiting North America long before Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So stand by.
Coast to Coast AM. Wait for it after dark.
Listen to Coast tonight, beginning at 10 p.m. on KSCO.
Welcome back to the Dr. Future Show. This last 2 segments, we have Alex Hagen on, who will be talking to us about a new economic way of thinking about things, a new economic model, if you will. And what's particularly interesting about this is that Alex has an ongoing business, 22 employees and expanding here in the Bay Area, an ISP, providing bandwidth for people who usually have difficulty getting it, and can provide you with massive bandwidth if you have a direct view of Mount Madonna or Loma Prieta. For example, yeah.
Yeah, let's
mic here. So we're going to bring on
closer
Alex
to the mic there, Alex.
Now, so you have an investment sort of in the existing system, having an ISP with 22 employees, and yet you have a model. Do you see it as a transitional model, or do you think the existing system has to collapse first?
Well, originally, back in 1993, I was working on how we could balance our budget and pay off our debt. So the model I used is to use 2 coordinates, an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. And the X coordinate is from productive to non-productive. So that's where people are deployed in the economy. Then there's from non-functional to functional. And that is the level that people are at. And in our society, a lot of non-functionality has to do with mental illness, addiction, alcoholism, lack of training.
That's the non-functional end of the spectrum. The other end would be professionals and
highly trained and meant and sane. And being somebody who's employed a lot of people, dealt with a lot of customers. I mean, there's a lot of idiosyncrasies in our population, and it's bred by our society.
Yeah, a lot of individuality in American culture.
Yeah, what I didn't anticipate back then is the plague and opportunity of people being digital. So when you see all the kids nowadays, you wonder, what are they going to develop like? Will creativity be the same when you're working inside that box? Because you need paper.
She wants to use
you need pens. You need creativity.
Right, so, right. To make it go.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with these kids. So in creating this model, you end up with 4 quadrants. The first quadrant, we'll start with the worst case. That's non-productive and non-functional. So the people aren't deployed into a productive area, and they also are function impaired. And this is analyzing the economy, a large.
You mean like homeless?
Well, it would be essentially.
No, I think not just homeless, but people who literally cannot function.
Old nursing homes?
Well, traditionally, this would be what we call the welfare class. But now what we have is we have an enormous amount of our population that's not in the workforce at all. And then, so non-productive, non-functional, different people will analyze it in different ways. But we can all agree that such a quadrant exists.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are people who need help for whatever reason. They can't help themselves.
And that typically would be government services or various charities that would take care of.
Right. I mean, in this area, you're dealing with a lot of people that have mental illness, addiction, alcoholism, things like that.
Yeah.
Then you have the people who manage them, the industry that manages this.
Hopefully they're more
population.
functional.
They're functional, but they're not actually deployed productively. And we need some people in these occupations. So, for example, the military. The military doesn't produce wealth. It protects wealth from being destroyed, in theory. Mm-hmm. So there's an appropriate level of military spending, but this country has gone off the rails since 9/11.
Oh, yeah. And when the military is like the largest employer for decent salaried jobs, you've really missed a turn here.
Well,
You've created a need for the military beyond its real use.
And then you have the surveillance state, which if you search for jobs online, government jobs, the best paying jobs by far are for programmers who have security clearances. And the zip codes in the United States with the highest per capita income are all dotted around
Silicon Valley.
No, they're all dotted in Maryland. And they're all dotted
NSA.
in the secret government. And I'm not talking about the secret government as a paranoid conspiracy theory. I'm talking about, this was published in the Washington Post. And they didn't call it the secret police because that would scare people, so they called it the secret government. But there's 1 million people in this country with security clearances paid to monitor.
There's a secret internet, for example, right?
Wow,
I heard
and
you tell me if this is true or not, but I've heard that the top of Loma Prieta, where you have a tower, that's the Mae West point. And that's a point where the civilian internet meets the military internet.
Well, there was a huge amount of money spent by Department of Homeland Security for anything you wanted. It was basically a Christmas list, and people told me this unapologetically when I went to seminars on government spending. So millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent to build and this is public disclosure, a microwave network around the Bay Area by the Department of Homeland Security. The emergency wireless network for this Santa Clara County, none of the cities will trust, is what I've heard.
Oh.
So when you have the government trying to operate things that are not their core competency, it could cause inefficiencies. But at any rate, the non-productive yet functional quadrant is partly also fire. So if we look at the U.S. economy, 20% of the U.S. economy is the military and the security state and prisons and police. It's about
20%? Yeah,
it's about $2 trillion. Actually, it's $2 trillion out of $16 trillion, so it's 1/8. So it's more like 12.5%. Okay, then 20% is medical care. So in both of these two areas, we are at double the rates of other industrialized countries. Mm-hmm. So then we have fire, which is finance, insurance, and real estate. Now, a healthy economy will have some bankers. The purpose of a banker is to tell you whether your business plan is viable or not, fundamentally. Do they fund you or do they not fund you? I mean, with automation, we shouldn't see more than 1% of GDP on banking. It was around 3% in the 90s. Now it's up to over 6% because it's a rent-seeking activity. And with the quantitative easing, with 0% interest, with the banks being able to use fractional reserve lending, it's just a license to print money. It's a fool's paradise. And you see Goldman Sachs, which wasn't that massive 10 years ago. You couldn't find where all their money was. Their power was much higher than where you could find their money, at least for me. Okay, now they're in the Dow. Goldman Sachs has moved to the Dow. They're the number one contributor to Romney, number one contributor to Obama. Interestingly, they lost all of Libya's money. Libya invested over $1 billion with them. And then when they flew to Libya to tell them they lost every dime that the Libyan Sovereign Investment Fund invested with them, the Libyans threatened them physically. And a few months later, Libya was no more. But, that's just one factor.
Just a matter of timing.
Well, if you mess with Goldman Sachs...
You're messing with some serious power.
You are.
So they would be part of a banking cabal?
Well, let's we don't have to. You follow the data and see where it takes you. I mean, I was studying about Freemasons the other night because I was studying about the Spanish Civil War. And they were ruthlessly suppressed all over the world. So, there are laws banning them in all Arab countries except 2. In England, you have to disclose if you work for the government that you're a Freemason or not. So, but at any rate,
so there's evidence of such activities.
Well, at one point they were a real thorn in the side of the Catholic Church. So I'm still, learning more about them. But in this finance, insurance, real estate, all 3 of these in a healthy economy might be 1 or 2% of GDP each. They've grown tremendously. Fire is the main engine of our economies, and we've taken our manufacturing over to China. Right. We de-industrialized.
For the time being, until the 3D printers really kick in.
Well, that'll be interesting, So then you have the productive functional quadrant, and that productive and functional quadrant is where we want everyone to be. And if you had everyone there, everyone would be a net tax generator rather than net tax recipient. It's because
you'd be creating more than you were
So those are the people who grow food, make cars, move things around. They actually are in the physical economy.
Well, you have 3 tiers of the economy. You have the primary industries, which would be agriculture, mining, and then you have the secondary industries, which is manufacturing, and then the tertiary, which is services. So I define a researcher at a university as somebody creating wealth. Not all of them, but in general, I would rather see the guys in the military right now.
In research.
10% of them going into research and development, not of things that are non-productive, but to
enhance.
Right, to create a paradise on Earth, which we could have. We have the technology, and we're only harnessing a very tiny percentage of our productive capacity in this country.
And we're held back by the infrastructure.
Well, we're held back by our whole
mentality.
Our whole, in business, what you do is you go from X to Y by when, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but in government, they are afraid to say that to people. They don't tell us, where are we going? Like, what was his name? Kurt Vonnegut was very surprised that we have no Department of the Future.
Right. And the General Accounting Office lost its ability to do accounting and hasn't filed an audited tax return ever in decades, and they're no longer called accounting offices, they're called accountability.
Right. So then the 4th quadrant you have is the productive but non-functional. So these are people who are deployed in the productive areas but are function impaired. So they could be doing better. So probably a quarter of any given company's manpower, woman power, is suffering from some impediments, whether it's mental illness or physical illness or lack of training or personal conflict. And so when you look at the system in these 4 quadrants, you say, how do we put everyone into the wealth producing sector? That's one angle to look at.
Yeah, how do they become part of that ecosystem?
And so what I looked at is I tore all the occupations in the whole.
Okay, let's continue how you did this, how you looked at it, the next step after our next break.
Okay.
All right,
Alex Hagen.
Yes, Alex Hagen, a local businessman and economic theorist, here on the Dr. Future Show. We'll be right back.
It's big time.
Hi, registered pharmacist Ben Fuchs here. I've been studying healthy bodies for 35 years, and what I've got to tell you may shock and surprise you, but if you listen up it may change your life. So many people want to start a weightlifting program, but they're intimidated, it takes too much time. I'm here to tell you it doesn't take a lot of time if you do it correctly. The key to a good, fast, rapid workout, effective workout, is intensity and not using momentum, exploiting all the different angles in your muscle movement. As you're doing your curl, your arms are obviously changing angles. You're starting with your arm hanging down, and then you curl upwards, and it goes into a 90-degree position, and then it goes up and up and up. If you take this muscle movement, you could divide it up into 100, 1,000 different parts. If you take your muscle movement and go really, really slow, if you take 30 seconds to do a curl, you're going to find that you can't even do 1 or 2 curls. If you're one of those people out there in the gym and you're doing a 50-pound dumbbell curl, and you're doing 4, 5, or 10 reps with a 50-pound dumbbell, if you do your curls the correct way, where you maximize every single position in the curl movement, you're not even going to be able to use 5 pounds or 10 pounds. If you're doing abdominal exercises, crunchers, or sit-ups, and you're doing 100 sit-ups or 50 sit-ups, guaranteed you're not doing those correctly. You should only be able to do 5 or 10 max abdominal crunchers if you're doing them correctly, and you do them correctly by exploiting every single muscle movement position. And it doesn't have to be with curls, and it doesn't have to be with abdominals. You can do it just sitting up. So the trick to an efficient workout is to spend as much time in high resistance positions as possible. Pharmacist Ben here, urging you to go to KSCOhealth.com to order Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the Healthy Start Pack, and other nutritional supplements that I personally use and recommend. You can purchase these premium quality products at wholesale prices online at KSCOhealth.com. That's KSCOhealth.com. I'm the pharmacist that believes that staying healthy and strong is not only about medicine, it's about giving your body the raw materials it needs to do its work. Go to KSCOhealth.com. Make sure you check out the cool videos, too, at KSCOhealth.com. That's KSCOhealth.com.
Okay, welcome back to the Dr. Feature Show. We're talking with Alex Hagen, CEO of Etheric Networks, about it's a new economic model. He had 4 quadrants that you outlined that we need, then that we can think about.
Right. It's just a model for
a way of thinking about economics.
Right. So when people want to defend non-productive elements of the economy, they have to concede the goal ultimately is to get as much of our people involved in productive activities, creation of wealth, and how you define wealth is another matter. Everyone's definition of wealth is going to be slightly different. But from this model comes the next step. Which is basically a progressive, libertarian, or in other words, small government conservative can be applicable, as well as a progressive, which is to figure out how we retake our communities so that the individual no longer has fear. Because a lot of accumulation of wealth has to do with fear. So if you can eliminate fear socially, then people will say enough, will hit to a point where they say enough. Like I know businessmen and industrialists and so forth who get to a certain point and then they refocus on what they can contribute to the world instead of what they can extract or have a balance. So like with etheric networks, I view this as a piece of a new economy. So
yeah, I can see that, but I think of networks and the internet as a kind of the communications is the core to the nervous system of the species, if you will. It connects us all and allows us to function as a species.
Right, but yesterday David Cameron came out in England. Never let a crisis go to waste, and he's introducing legislation to basically illegalize a free internet, which is that you will no longer be allowed to have privacy online at all. No email will be allowed that they can't crack.
In other words, there'd be a crackdown on encryption schemes?
Right. So nothing can be hidden from the GHCQ.
That can't happen. Right? I mean, ultimately.
Well,
if there's a will, there's a way.
There's a fear-based thinking.
What if it's a felony for you to use encryption they can't crack?
It sounds like thought crime. It really does sound like.
Well,
it's not the internet. The internet is supposed to empower the individual, and an individual can't be empowered if they have no privacy.
It's an old-fashioned form of control.
Right. I mean, it's killing the internet. And I didn't see it this clearly until with these steps that have happened, where We have libraries and internet providers that are served papers that have to provide information, aren't allowed to tell anyone they've been served these orders by the government. But now
we have to get rid of government privacy.
That's right.
And we have to give individuals quite a lot of it, although there needs to be some kind of overview.
You do deal with requests from the government to look at some of your subscribers? Does that ever happen?
Well, I'm not allowed to talk about it.
But that does happen. I've heard from other
But I'll
MSPs,
tell you,
yeah.
we've had a pretty fortunate experience. The only cases we've had, I think, are disclosable. One was somebody hacked into one of our servers to start to probe an Air Force computer. And so, of course, we cooperated. That's not something we want. Mm-hmm. And then the other one had to do with we have, over 1,000 customers. One of the customers was apparently involved in child porn. Mm-hmm. So those are the only two cases in our whole 11 years we've been served with national security letters.
Right. Okay, so
your experience is that government is pretty accountable then. They're pretty right on when they are asking you for that kind of permission.
They might know who I am, and they might not. They might just go in and get it instead of asking me.
But you haven't had foreign governments try to access stuff through you, though, right?
Well, we've had Chinese print show up on our computers at times, but I did have one of my old American employees retire and move to China and do our phone support at night. You probably dealt with him, Bob Burns.
Sure. Yeah.
And people were just astonished that he lived in a village in China. So I outsourced overseas, but only to a good old American hippie who moved over there to retire.
In China, really?
Right. Yes,
there is.
Yeah, but eventually he got a little too laid back, and I had a riot over here, and I had to retire him. So,
oh dear.
People would call and say, that old thing, don't worry, in a few hours it'll go away. And so that was the end of Bob Burns.
But did it set it up for you, though, to think of your company as a global company?
Well, that's a question about we can't vote anymore with our votes. Yale came out with a study saying that basically the democracy is dead, for example. That's too long to go into in 7 minutes, but we can vote with our money. So what that means is, first you look at, I'm going to buy organic agriculture, from local farmers. I'm going to buy from local businesses. I'm going to keep our economy alive by spending my money and we create a prosperous economy. Mm-hmm. If we give our money to Walmart, if we give it to the Fortune 500, we're basically sealing our own fates because what they have not been responsible. But if you can find a good small business or medium business or even a good large business anywhere in the world, it's basically the same as buying from a local small business.
Buy small rather than buy local, right?
Well, there are Christian concepts, there are Buddhist concepts. The Buddhist concept is right livelihood. And E.F. Schumacher in Small is Beautiful said, I would have called this, at one point it was referred to as Buddhist economics. He said, I would have called it Christian economics, but then no one would have read the book.
Well, some Christians.
Well, that's what he said, So,
democracy, I think, is meant to be a local phenomenon, and self-sustaining economies are ones where people know each other because they are getting the multiplier effect of spending their money on each other instead of having the money extracted from that circle.
Correct. Yes. And so my elevator pitch for where this all goes, to cut to the chase, is how do you get small government conservatives and progressives to work together to drain the swamp of a system that less than 1% of the people control more than 50% of the resources, and it's getting worse every day. Everybody knows the game is rigged, it's getting more rigged, and it's accelerating. It's not slowing down. Now, your show, you talk about all the hopeful things, that there's still people that can create wealth and participate. But basically,
there's a consolidation of wealth going on.
Right. So the 50%, the 99% who still have 50% of resources need to deal with each other. So there's a tug of war. So we can keep our half of the world for the 99% and gradually pull it back. So one example would be if we organized a co-op education system. So that it was private, because I personally have had a terrible experience with the public education. There's good public education, but there's a lot of problems with it. And in this case, if you put an initiative for San Mateo County, you went to the big wealthy guys there in Silicon Valley and said, we'll eliminate your property taxes if we privately organize this. So we can disconnect the government one module at a time if we can self-organize. And the way you would deal with it is if you don't hit certain educational levels and standards, the property taxes kick right back in.
Oh, that's great. So you created an incentive to be go back to the original basis for taxation was it was a voluntary contribution of those who were abundant enough to contribute to the public good. Well, and now it's a mandatory contribution whether you like what they're doing or not.
We pay rent to live in this country. We cannot live without paying rent, which means we cannot be free. So I personally believe that primary domicile people should not have any government costs associated to it.
Oh, so if you own your own property, you shouldn't have to pay taxes.
You shouldn't have to pay. People should be able to organize themselves because, from what I've been able to tell you, only need 20% of your workforce to provide the basics, and it's going down every year. So we should be able to have access to. We should be able to get back our land so that people own their land without bank loans, that they don't pay any leases on it. They should be able to have access to a network of organic farms. There should be an access to a network of research universities. And so if you have education, health, medicine, you gradually, not exactly privatize it, but create an opt-in structures. Opt-in structures rather than coercive mandatory structures. Yeah. And this also allows competition. And the real question is, how do you get every community be more different, not more similar? Because when you drive across the United States now, you basically see the same strip malls, the same big fast food outlets. Santa Cruz is beautiful. There's still many beautiful places. But this crushing sameness, monotony, and we rebelled against it in the 50s and 60s. If you watch a film, you can see a lot of critiques, like 1,000 Clowns, I think is what it was called. But then there was a counter-revolution under Reagan. He said, we don't want these kids organizing in college. So he raised the tuitions, and now no one is studying philosophy at college. And if you study the Spanish Civil War, you see the same thing. The viciousness of the counter-revolutions is even greater than the viciousness of the populist revolutions. So that's where we have to be very careful.
And then it goes back and forth. Now maybe it's time for another flip of that next chapter in that story.
Well, maybe we can do things without hating each other.
Right. We transcend hatred. That's thinking non-dualistically. You're getting beyond.
Also focusing on the idea that the goal here is self-sovereignty. The goal here is to come up with a way that as many individuals as possible can just take care of their own needs so that they don't have to get any handouts from the government for anything. And then we can retire the government.
Well, that's the Jeffersonian model, the yeoman freeholder, yeowoman freeholder, who has dignity, who stands on their own feet and isn't full of fear and alienation of losing their job, of losing their medical care, of having their kid put in a school they can't transfer them out of, that they're being bullied at.
We're almost out of time, but a couple things. One, do you think that the new communications we're evolving could help support a direct democracy as opposed to a representative one?
That's absolutely part of it. The other thing I recommend people look at is Article the First. Article the First indicates we should have 5,000 people in the House, not 435.
Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is that we only have 30 seconds, but if we want to connect with you, how do we reach you?
Well, I have a website, microtopia.org.
Microtopia.org.
And send me an email at alex@microtopia.org. The next step is to try to connect all these different movements together online. And that's more than a job for one man, but, I'm working on it.
It's a nice start.
Well, there's a Naomi Wolf, who's a sort of a mixed character. She's working on trying to create this this dynamic self-organizing online.
Naomi Wolf. Okay, you had to talk about that at your website?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, thank you. Alex Hagan, CEO of Etheric Networks, talking to us about Microtopia ideas.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening, folks. Dr. Future Show on KSCO, Santa Cruz.